Hi, my name is Anthony. I'm here today with Cybrary.it. I'm your local subject matter expert here for A+, and today we're going to talk about motherboards. We have our computer here, and when we open it up and we take a look inside, we're going to find that our motherboard is pretty much what everything is connected to. Our hard drives, our peripheral cards, our optical drives, everything in some way is connected to that motherboard. Even the power, or especially the power supply, is connected to that motherboard and giving everything power through the motherboard. To give it a basic definition, our motherboard is really the base of our computer. It's what provides the connections for all the different components to run. In a way, it sort of acts like a highway for all the connections and all the different computer components to send information across. Rather than just having a bunch of wires tangled up on our computer that connect to everything, we have that base motherboard which everything plugs into. Now, motherboards come in different sizes. These are known as form factors. The form factor being how they fit in the case. The size of a motherboard greatly depends on the size of our computer and which motherboard we can fit into our computer. Now, there are several different types of motherboard form factors. Many different types of motherboard form factors. But there are a couple in particular that we're going to focus on today, and these are specifically going to be the ones that are required by the A+ 801 exam. We have our motherboard here. This motherboard has several components. We have where our CPU would go, we have our RAM slots, different PCI slots, and we have all of our additional input-output over here. And depending on the size and the type of connections that we have on our motherboard, help to determine what type of form factor this motherboard is. Now, generally, when we're talking about form factors, we're only talking about motherboards that go in a particular, like a desktop computer or say a server. We usually don't try to memorize all of the different form factors for say laptop computers, because laptop motherboards are built very specifically for the exact make and model laptop that they're in. Because of laptops are designed to be small and very mobile, the motherboard sort of has to work around everything else. So rather than just a generic motherboard that's inside the laptop, we have multiple stacked layers here that curve around our CD drive and move so that we can fit in additional components. And rather than having a single form factor, we have thousands and thousands of different ways that laptop motherboards are configured in order for everything to fit properly. One of the first motherboard types that we're going to go over is going to be the ATX, Advanced Technology Extend. Now, this is one of our form factors that we can see quite often, and some of the key identifiers for this motherboard that we can look at are that it has a rear input-output cluster. We actually have one here that we're going to use for demonstration. Now, before I go further, let me say a quick disclaimer. This is not actually an ATX board. This is a micro-ATX board, which is another one that we'll get into in just a second. It's a little bit smaller than a regular ATX board, but it's generally the same as far as what it's going to have on there. The regular ATX board will just be a little bit bigger size. This micro-ATX is a good representation. On our ATX board, as well as our micro-ATX board, we're going to have a rear input-output cluster. We're going to have expansion slots, which are parallel to the short side. We're going to have a left side case opening, so when we're looking at our computer, the computer is going to open from the left side. We'll have 7 expansion slots at the maximum. Now, in this, we have less because this is a micro. And then the size of an ATX board will be a max width of 12 inches and a max depth of 9.6 inches. And these are usually used in a full-size tower computer. Usually, these boards will also come with at least a triple channel memory, which means it has 2 banks of 3 slots, so that will be 6 slots total for memory. Now, the next type of computer board that we're going to talk about is going to be the micro-ATX board. Again, the board that I just had in my hand. The micro-ATX is all the initial qualities of the ATX that we just mentioned, rear input, output cluster, etc. But with the micro ATX board, it's going to have a max width of 9.6 and a max depth of 9.6 inches. So for this board, it's going to be square rather than the ATX board, which would normally be more rectangular, because we saw that the width and depth were different. So this board, though, will be rectangular. This one actually has a max of 4 expansion slots, which we see we have 1, 2, 3, 4 expansion slots. And it's going to have dual channel memory with 2 slot banks. So we'll have our 4 slots for memory right here, 2 slots in each bank. And these are actually color-coded for our memory banks. One more ATX board, which isn't required according to the curricula for the A+ exam, but we have here, so we'll take a look, is our ATX Extend. Now this is going to be bigger than our standard ATX board, but it's a little bit easier to navigate our way around and to see what's on here. We have our additional expansion slots. We have our memory here. And on this board, we can actually see we have 2 places for CPUs. This can come in handy, especially on, say, a bigger server computer that we're using more for server capacity. That we have that additional CPU power. So this is going to be, again, our ATX Extend. So we've talked about our ATX, and we've also talked about our micro ATX. The next one we need to talk about is the ITX. Now, the ITX is a little bit smaller than the ATX. The mini-itx, which unfortunately we don't have an example here, is going to be a maximum of 6.7 inches by 6.7 inches. So even smaller than the micro ATX. The mini-itx is a very small form factor board, which makes it an advantage for, say, one of the small desktop computers that we may get. Very handy. But it only has a single PCI expansion slot. So the extra video card that we may want to put in there, or the additional adapters that we may want to add, with that mini-itx, we're going to have less of an opportunity to do so because it's only going to have one PCI expansion slot. So with our 3 different types of boards, our ATX, our micro ATX, and our mini ITX, we're going to see that we have our 3 boards that are going to be the big ones that we want to make sure that we focus on and know how to identify for our A+ exam.